And before we get into some questions, and we're going to keep it informal tonight, guys, because Adam doesn't have like a slide deck or anything. And, we're just going to keep it fairly informal. But I guess let's start a little bit about just to frame what you're currently doing and sort of how you led up to this point in time. Because I know you from Get Emails, but obviously there was a lot that was going on before Get Emails.
Sure. Well, I graduated college in 2003, and I moved to New York to take this job at Lehman Brothers and trade credit default swaps, which I was kind of mentioning earlier. And my roommates started Vimeo, the video sharing site, in the apartment that I was living in. So I just thought it was the coolest life they had ever. And
you still know those guys?
I do. They still all have pretty wild lives, coincidentally, in very different ways. So in 2008, the financial crisis happened. It was led by the securities that I was trading, and the firm that I worked for went bankrupt. And, we got bought by this company, Barclays. And there was like one good year after, but then the government basically regulated what we were doing out of existence. And, it was really easy for me to just sort of walk away from this job that I didn't really like. And, I managed to save some money, and these guys were such an inspiration that were in tech. And one of my mentors told me, it's not about the skill set you had the last 10 years, like get one for the next 50, because we're all going to live longer and work till we're 90. And, what you were doing doesn't really exist anymore. So, I tried to become a tech guy, made a ton of bad investments, wasted a ton of time chasing these horrible ideas with people who had no idea what they were doing, including me. And then somehow I stumbled across this email marketing space, like, MailChimp does basically, or Constant Contact. My brother he was an entrepreneur already 10 years prior, and he was using a software called Breakpoint for email marketing and customer review management. And that company had raised $25 million and then just shut their doors completely in 2012 with no explanation. They just said, download your data. And my brother was like, hey, you're looking for something to do. Let's build this thing on the cheap overseas or whatever and go find this guy's customers, because he bought a lot of them. He found a lot of them, or he spent a lot of money getting them. And somehow the CEO of that company saw this YouTube video I made. I was reading books about content marketing that were all garbage. They were, content marketers writing books about how content marketing was everything, and all you had to do was write stuff and throw it up online, and you'd have this $1 million business. But this guy saw this video that I made, told me to come to Boston, and he said, I'm not going to tell you too much because my co-founder's starting a data company, but there's a ton of information about, and I'm not allowed to say the company's name, but about the company down the street who does email marketing all over the internet. They don't know it's there. Go find it. Go build a call center. Go build a product. Give them a good offer. And you will have a cash flow positive business at the end of that. Because I just did it, and I just ran out of money, had too much overhead, whatever. We did that. It was so unbelievable to have someone just kind of give you, and it still was so difficult and expensive. If I could do it over again, it would have cost a tenth as much and done 10 times as fast with a tenth of the people. But somehow we managed to get this, email marketing company up and running. And when I started it, the dream of some guy who wears a suit to work every day and works on a trading floor is to have this, I don't know if anybody's read the Basecamp guys, the 37 Signals, the book called Remote or Rework. Mm-hmm. Rework, exactly. It's this idea that you can have a small tech company that's a great lifestyle business, and you don't have to go to an office, and you can live anywhere, and you can live on a ski mountain and all this stuff. And that was just the most appealing thing in the world for somebody who was going to a tall building in Times Square for 10 years. And this little email marketing company turned into that, but interestingly, the space that it's in, I mean, it's not, this newsletter space is like a really, I mean, in my opinion, it's a very hard market and bad market to compete in because it's incredibly mature. These companies like Constant Contact and MailChimp and whoever, they started with, I mean, they're not that different of products 15 years later. There's hundreds of,
Aweber, I remember those.
yeah, yeah,
Those are
exactly.
the three
And
big
they're
ones.
kind of doing the same thing now that they were like Active Campaign for all intents and purposes. The value of that thing is this drag and drop automation builder. And they launched that in 2012, right? So like 8 or 9 years later, the
Same
products
product.
haven't changed that much.
Yeah.
And there's a couple, I mean, MailChimp is an unbelievable brand. They're spending $1 billion a year marketing that thing. And it's a free product for 90% of the market. It's like, how are you supposed to compete with that? And a couple people have done it really well. Everybody else was stuck in kind of the situation that we were in. You get to wherever you get with your first sort of strategy, and then you're stuck in this single digit million revenue range. You can't compete for customers online with them. They're in every channel that you can think of. So you just have this business that's like sort of slowly churning, and then people are upgrading to offset it, but it's
There's no hockey
annoying.
stick. There's no
No,
hockey
well,
stick.
it's just annoying because you can't figure out how to grow it. You know, this thing that you thought you wanted, this like great lifestyle business that's super chill and everybody's happy. It's great, but well, the biggest problem is, I think, that like you're looking at the thing and you know it's going to end at some point. You know, you're like, wow, if I can't add customers in some way at any price, and believe me, I've tried about 15 different ways over the last 4 years, and these guys have it's just a very difficult market, and there's 200 other vendors who would agree with me. So yeah, just it was a really, you know, the last from that strategy, that first strategy ended sometime in 2016. So like the first half of 2016. And from then till 2019, when we spun out, the end of 2019, when we spun out this next company that Brian knows me from, Get Emails, it was literally just like one attempt after the other, and like big sort of 6 months to 1 year, you know, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars like going for this thing that like, oh, I think, you know, like Constant Contact got acquired. It's like, let's try to take over their partner program. You know, that makes sense because they're cutting it like huge waste. Like tried to build an upmarket email service provider because we thought that MailChimp was kind of under servicing them. Turns out 9 other vendors were like fighting over the same people. Countless times agencies charm me into like, oh yeah, well you should just advertise on Facebook or like whatever. Nothing even, it happened again this year. Somehow someone convinced me again to try to like advertise on Facebook. And I mean, we spent 50 grand and acquired like 15 customers that were paying $19 a month. I mean, just, you know, it's crazy how competitive the space is and how good the brands are. So my life was trying to figure out what we could do that like these big vendors were not doing that could possibly get people to switch over to our little newsletter app. And, you know, somehow in conversations with a string of people, you know, this guy that I'm friends with in New York, he's CEO of this company called Bounce Exchange, which is like kind of like a enterprise marketing services / software as a service business. And they do all sorts of stuff. He was very excited at the end of a couple of years ago about this identity resolution technology. He bought this company who just came out of Techstars, and he was just like, you don't understand. They're basically the e-commerce sites, only 15% of their users are logged in for anybody but like Amazon and Facebook. But tons of people are putting things in their carts and they're leaving. And if you knew who they were, their emails on your list, and you could send them more of these cart abandonment emails. I don't really think much of it.
This was what year?
This is probably the end of 2018. And I'm still well into trying something else. I started thinking a lot more of it when a couple months later, one of my friends who was also his customer was like, man, this is like crazy. This works. It's unbelievable. They can match 75% of the people that are not logged in, and we're sending out like 5 times as many cart abandonment emails. So and I was like, man.
Stop for a second and tell folks what Get Emails is.
So Get Emails does that. I mean, not just for e-commerce, but we identify anonymous web traffic for you. You could put our script on your site and we'll tell you who a third of the people are on your site, even if they didn't fill out a form. Email, first name, last name, postal record. It's crazy. What pages they were on, the whole thing. Slightly gray area. It's legal. It's not legal in Europe, not legal in Canada. But the demand for it is real. And
And like you said, I think what I was kind of fascinated by recently is because I have the script on my site. A past customer I hadn't heard from in years, it visited my site, and the software notified me that this guy visited me. I said, I know Steven. And so of course he was on my site, but he didn't contact me. So of course I reached out to him. He goes, oh, I was just thinking of you. Well, now I know. So it's sort of a stealthy way. And I don't think there's anything about it, Adam, that makes me feel, I think that the reality is if they're interested, you want to be, helped along. If you're making it easier for your customers to work with you, it makes sense.
I agree with you, but I sell it. There's a group of people out there who don't like it from a privacy standpoint. But it is what it is. If it becomes illegal in the US, which I don't believe it will, we'll stop doing it. We'll have to sell something else. But this was so where this came from was eventually I just, kept talking to person after person and like, who's in this market, who's competing, how are they doing it? And eventually we figured out how to do it. And my idea was, we'll make this a feature inside the email marketing app, get people to switch over. Mm-hmm. And finally I'll be able to grow this thing again. And I'm not going to sit here thinking, man, how many years is this going to last? Like, what's the next thing? And the funny thing was we did that April of last year. And a few months in, we noticed people were signing up for our email newsletter app. They were only using this identification feature and downloading the files every day and putting them in their email marketing app. So and they love the product. We'd ask them what they thought, 1 to 10, how likely they were to recommend it to a friend. And they were just like, this is the greatest thing ever. These leads they engage just like Facebook, and they're, 25 cents, and I'm paying $1.50 for an opt-in from Facebook. So that was like a really good early indicator that we were onto something. If somebody thinks the product's great and they have to go through a horrible user experience to actually use it.
Well, and that was one of my questions is how vital was it that you had an existing customer base to launch this new?
Oh my gosh. You couldn't have done I don't know how we could, I wouldn't have. So I'm remembering something else now as you asked that question. My confidence in this being a thing, the way we were doing it, was not high when it started. It was basically like the idea is very sexy. Like, I can sell you email addresses of people that are on your site. Who doesn't want that? And the other thing that I really liked about it was, even if it really worked, MailChimp and these big email marketing companies couldn't do it because you can't be in this self-regulatory deliverability organization if you sell data. It's like, MailChimp and Salesforce Marketing Cloud and Gmail and Hotmail and these guys. So if anything bad really happens to MailChimp, they have like a body at Gmail that they can call and say, you're blocking all of our email. Like, can we work this out? You can't be in that organization if you sell data. So I was like, this is like, what feature in software can you build and your competitors can't copy it? It seemed very rare to me. So that was the most exciting part about it, but I still didn't really believe that it would work. And it wasn't until, so much so that even when we were getting good customer feedback from our current customers, and I was like, okay, we should probably, this is kind of a bad product if we're making people switch to our ESP and they're not even using it. They're just down, So I still didn't have enough confidence to distract the team from what we were trying to do to continue these failed attempts to grow the email marketing company.
This is Roble you were trying to.
Yeah, Roble, right. I designed it with little Photoshop mock-ups, had somebody on Upwork do the HTML and CSS, and our CTO then, after all, probably 6 weeks of work on Upwork, not even touching our existing team. Like he got all this UI and then like, plugged it all together over a couple of weeks. Like I didn't want to like distract the mothership from what we'd been trying to do the last 3 years.
So it was kind of a side project.
It still seemed like it was very like a whim, like this is another one of my crazy ideas that for sure won't work for some reason. That was kind of how I was treating it. Right.
Okay.
And it's like, this thing's paying us. We want to keep improving it. Maybe we'll get lucky at some point. We know that whatever. So that was kind of the
evolution. I like it.
Yeah, exactly. And I just don't even think we would have built it if we didn't have, I don't even know if we would have done it if we didn't have people telling us with this horrible user experience that it was great, And the weird thing was all the people that told us that it's great have since churned for strange reasons, which is where, it's another problem with this product. It's like so easy to sell to people, but like there's, it's still far from perfect. There's like the publisher that's most excited about it was Marin Magazine, and they ended up churning because they only wanted California addresses. And we like they're the only customer out of like 1,000 paying customers that only wants them from one state.
Yeah.
And we were unwilling to build them a feature. So they just quit, anyhow.
Cool. No, and we had a speaker last month who at Dazuki, it was basically a product they were using in-house, kind of like what the base camp guys did. They've had a few products they developed. I think Trello came out of that, and it was like they were just using it internally, and they maybe got some user feedback that, hey, can we use this for our company? And so, it's pretty common that if you look at your business and you try lots of different things, I think you'll find something that maybe starts to catch. But you have unique perspective because you're in a unique position to get emails off the ground in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that was really helpful. And I don't know, and we're kind of doing it again. I'm a little bit afraid. There's a couple reasons why get emails is scary. One is it uses third-party cookies for the identification part, and Google's phasing them out of Chrome, which is basically the only place we're identifying people now. And I have a lot of smart people telling me that there will be IP-based solutions for this identity problem when the cookies get phased out, but nobody can tell me who is going to be the person who has that, or if they're working on it yet, or what. So it's kind of this like, well, as of right now, if these things go away, I literally am like in a zero revenue scenario.
Right.
And people are like, no, it's a big enough problem. Somebody's going to solve it. It's not hard to solve. It's just, there's no reason to solve it yet because the cookies are still the best way to do it. And this is like a backup way. So that's one of them. And the other problem is, it's just not great to be selling something that it's like Canada and Europe have said what this is illegal, period. And like the US is definitely changing our attitude towards privacy. I think it's in ways that will not make this illegal, but like, I don't think longer term you want to be in the business of necessarily selling people's full PII that like didn't really consent in any way to get it sold. So we're now going to our existing Get Emails customers, and we think we've found this thing that some other guys have built that we can sort of like just white label and build software on top of this technology. And they swear in every case where somebody has traffic, it seeds a lookalike audience in Facebook with like your hottest leads who are about to buy, and it just like lowers your cost of acquisition by like 40%. So we're now getting beta testers on that from the Get Emails users. And I just want to see if it works in the first place. And if it does, then figure out if we continue paying these guys for it or try to figure out what it's doing and build it or whatever. But that's, ultimately, I really want to get out of this Get Emails market. And if we can do something that, that doesn't touch PII at all. It's just like, just pushing segments into these guys, And if it actually works, which we're going to get some tests going this month, then get emails. Another problem with it is there's an implicit sort of ceiling on how large the customer is that will buy it, because like there's consumer sort of PR risk to huge companies. Like Nike is like never going to like buy email addresses and postal addresses from us, because if their customers found out they were doing that, they would just be upset. Our perfect customers, like a VC backed, you know, they need to grow at all costs. Like,
yeah, or content management company, you know, content companies like what the business I'm in.
Totally, yeah. Publishers are
Publishing.
great. Yeah, exactly.
And if you're like an author and you basically are trying to build your audience and somebody's interested in your book, I mean, could you imagine if, you know, I was telling you about that book earlier, but if I went to his website and then all of a sudden I got an email from him inviting me to his, you know, tribe, whatever, I would totally be jazzed for that because I already was a fan of the book. That's why I went to his website in the first place. So I hear you. It's probably a niche. It's always going to be a niche audience. But let's see. As a co-founder, what is the structure that it was? Are you a co-founder at Get Emails? I wasn't clear on that.
Yeah, you know, that was actually an interesting decision. So I have like 40% of my company. I put money in also and didn't take a salary for a long time.
This is Roble?
Yeah, we have 3 other co-founders. My brother put the same amount of money I did in, never worked for it, but he's got 20%. And we have a guy who is no longer working for either company, but didn't take a salary for 3 years and has 20% of Roble. And then our CTO has 20% of Roble. So we kept the same ownership in the next business because Get Email, I mean, you know, it's kind of annoying that these guys who have not participated effectively in so long, I mean, Roble's been just churning off cash for, you know, 5 or 6 years. They own 40% of the company, but the issue was, I thought, when it was a feature in Roble, discovering it, you know, it took 3 failed attempts. We probably spent $1 million of the investors' money getting to that point, you know, and we really did. It really was a total spin out with the staff, the resources, all that stuff. I mean, now we have 2 separate teams, but like, I just kept thinking, like, if I were an investor in Roble, like, I would look at this one and say, that's my asset. The next thing, this custom audiences thing, to me, it's like, and I've been talking about it with our CTO, is the only guy who's still working on it. If this actually works, to me, it's like it's not a feature inside of, you know, it's got nothing to do. It's
totally separate. Yeah.
Yeah. It's got nothing to do with the original business these guys invested in, you know? Right. So I think we would, if it actually ends up being something we pursue, we'll probably do it in some other entity with some other structure. But so
you need to be careful about how you spin off your technology and how it's kind of attached, because if you've got investors in the company, they're going to expect to have now ownership in this other entity.
And it's, you know, I think it just kind of had to, you know, and the other thing was just from a purely, I mean, selfish, I guess is the way, or like just examining my situation, who is ultimately the only, like, I have like sole decision-making power in the LLC. Even if I screwed over my brother and this other guy, I would probably only get 10% more of it. And so it's like jeopardizing a relationship with my brother, who put like $1 million in this thing 7 years ago, and a very dear friend of mine. It just didn't seem, for a story that like I didn't even truly believe in, you know,
right?
Like if I were looking them in the eye and saying, "Hey, man," like, and what we probably would end up doing is just giving Roble like a funding portion of it. Said, okay, like Roble gets like 25% of this because it used Roble's resources to get to cash flow positive.
I didn't think about that. When you take money, that you're somewhat chained to that, or, you know, to that commitment for a period of time. I don't know how the contract was set up, but I mean, because I've always bootstrapped and I've always been very reluctant to take on any money, because I don't want to be, you know, I like the freedom, but in some ways you're still, hooked to your customers. It's not like you're going to
Right.
fail. But that's an interesting thing. So what were the metrics that you focused, talking about get emails, what are the metrics that you focused on in the beginning? And then what are the metrics you focus on now?
Well, I have, just like you, like a bootstrapping orientation. I mean, we ended up putting way too much money of our own money into Roble, but it was like my brother and I, so it's not like we had it was the kind of money that like didn't really care if we decided that we weren't going to grow it anymore and we were going to strip it down and run it for cash, like we ended up doing. And just watching so a few other guys that I knew left finance and went into tech, and some of them have raised like ungodly amounts of money and like, just been on this VC treadmill. And watching them do that over years, it's just not appealing to me. I'm very oriented towards, at least break even, cash flow positive. Like, I don't want to worry about where my salary is coming from, who's going to pay the employees, all that stuff. I don't want to be, pounding the pavement, rate. Just finished a round, got to start raising the next one. Like, I kind of like more of the product and marketing and, technology.
Yeah, feed the investor. And that's because there's a whole tech, it's called Hot House, but they're really centric towards the funding path. So they help the Cal Poly students go through this whole process of how to basically put together a plan where you go out and you start raising money from VCs. And some of these companies have raised over $1 million. And these are like the darlings of Cal Poly's, entrepreneurial students. So, but once you're on that treadmill, I agree with you that you're sort of.
It just everything has to go right,
It's a lot of pressure.
And I certainly haven't ever had everything go right. And it's great when it doesn't go how you think it goes, that it can still turn into a success story if you don't have somebody breathing down your neck saying, well, I mean, this isn't what I signed up for. Like, go, here's more money, like, go grow this somehow. So the metrics I was looking at, man, get emails was wild. We were just getting so we started doing these Facebook ads, my girlfriend and I, and they were kind of like funny. I had this view that people were on Facebook and they wanted to be amused, and it was a platform where everybody's just doing selfie videos. So we did these like kind of funny selfie videos, a different new one every week. And they just crushed it. I mean, we were like spending $5,000 on ads and getting like 10,000 in monthly recurring revenue. Like, that was the first month. And then it just continued. And then COVID happened and all the big companies stopped doing ads, and like the ad inventory got cheap. So we had this next incredible sort of just growth period using these ads. So that was, but the whole time I was sort of, I had, we had this luxury where basically all of this Get Email staff was still getting paid by Roble, and kind of person by person, we were switching them over to Get Emails as Get Emails grew, which is such a fortunate situation to be in. And I think also the argument that the Roble ownership should probably be the same as Get Emails if you can do that. But it was always about, I think even like, week 8, I was like, okay, I have an expensive salesperson. I'm expensive. The CTO is expensive. We have our expensive head of product at Roble that I'm bringing over. And we want a backup salesperson to just do inbound. So like, what's the hurdle that I have to get to monthly recurring revenue wise to pay for all those people? I don't even remember what it was. I think it was $100,000 or something. But that was like kind of how I was thinking. It's just like, I'm going to do whatever I can to get there. And Get Emails is wild. We have people who've come in off Facebook ads who pay us $25,000 a month, which is just nuts. I mean, but the churn rate, the problem is now the churn rate's astronomical also, because this idea is something that a lot of people have not heard of before. But it seems like the larger companies and the better marketers can make this work, whereas most people cannot. So a lot of people are signing up and dropping after 60 or 90 days, which is just a problem because if you have 10 or 15% of your base dropping and your base gets bigger.
Isn't that the Geico model? That's why they're always doing ads, because they lose people at such a fast rate.
Probably. So I mean,
my understanding, because once you're in Geico, the second year, your rates go up so much that everyone cancels.
Yeah, I mean, could be. But this churn thing is a problem with all software as a service companies, and it's a major one for ours. But so initially the focus was, there was like, for most of the first 6 months or so, I was just like, I want to hire somebody for marketing, because we never had anyone in marketing at Roble, because I just couldn't justify it, because I didn't think, just marketing wouldn't work. But I'm like, I really want somebody to help us out in marketing, but I'm not going to do that until we cross 100 grand a month in revenues. And we ended up not hiring this guy till we hit 200 or something. But now literally it's just like, we're in a position where we've kind of hit this size where at the churn rate that we have two choices. We could either just sell larger subscriptions, and then you're dropping people who are smaller and adding people who are bigger, and that will grow you until those people start canceling. But the hope is that
I see that model all the time, where the price is basically free or $800 a month. Like,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a model, and it works. And the really, for us, what the dream would be if it were like free or $1,000 a month minimum with a 12-month contract or something, like, because then the churn rate is definitely no less than 12 months. Yeah. But we kind of, I've been having this conversation with the couple people who are closest to it for the last couple months. It's like, we're basically a glorified list broker right now. And if you, and the list working has such different meanings for different types of businesses. For e-commerce businesses, most of them, all they want to see is ROI equal to or higher than all of their other channels. Some of them also want to grow their audience and be able to like move it between the platforms and stuff. But most, it's straight up like, I get 4-to-1 on Facebook. If you can't show me 4-to-1, then I'm not interested. Publishers, some of them are trying to convert people to subscriptions. That's a relatively high bar to jump over. Others are literally just like, I want eyeballs on my content, and I want people clicking through to my website, because I convert a certain amount of those clicks to affiliate revenues. That's my whole model. And if it's the second guy, that guy's like our best type of guy, because our open rates and click rates are great. But converting these seems to be harder than converting a normal opt-in, obviously, because the intent is much lower. The discussion right now is like, okay, we're glorified list brokers right now. Obviously, no one's going to sign a 12-month contract to have a list broker. That's absurd. Even the notion of it is absurd. Like, what would an enterprise company, what would Sephora sign a 12-month contract with us for? Or for instance, what are these brands? Mm-hmm. And we think it's some sort of like hybrid service, and this, and maybe the customer, I don't know. We don't know what it is yet, but the goal would be, this is kind of like our pipe dream. It's like, if we can get something that we're selling to people at that sort of
high value, yeah,
status, like you're approaching people, telling them that this is what you're giving them, and it's a 12-month deal, and they even with like a 2-month out or something, and they're excited about it and they do it, then we're in like a total different ball game than we're playing right now. But there's another situation. It's like, this one got to where I got Roble to in 3 years, in like 9 months, but now it's kind of stuck, and I've given up on the advertising strategy that we were doing before, just because, maybe I could get a little more out of it, but like, it wasn't clear that it was working as well as it was working before. And with that group of people, the churn rate's so high, I just know that we can't grow it that much more than we can, than where it's at right now, because it's just the the ceiling from churn is so bad.
You need to get it to where there's no overhead, right? If it's a one-man company.
Well, that's, exactly.
There's a lot of those. There's a lot of people out
Totally.
there who are one-man companies that are multi-million-dollar businesses because it's a low overhead kind of an operation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, either that or figure out how to get churn in like the low single digits, which is going to be a massive, massive undertaking.
All right. So does anyone else have any questions for Adam? I had a list that I was going through, but I want to open it up for you guys if there's anything. No?
Carol's here.
I've got a question. I think of churn rate as people leaving products and that sort of thing. When you talk about churn rate, are you saying people sign up for a month or two and then go away? Is that what happens?
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
Exactly.
So they're not using the product, right? That's the problem.
Well, most of them are using it, but they can't, for what they're paying for the emails, they're not seeing ROI.
They're not
Yeah.
converting it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Like most of the bigger guys, who have like great product market fit and they're great email marketers and, they have whole departments doing this, they make it work and it's not really an issue at all. But the people we were pulling off of Facebook have a hard time just getting it to work.
See, the way I plan to use it is, or I plan to expand my value of it is, I do websites for authors and small businesses now. So I want to set up a landing page and do a marketing campaign where we drive traffic to that one sales page. And we have an opt-in in that page, but I'd like to, depending on how many people decide to actually opt in, offset that with, well, here's how many emails we got just acquisition through the website. And I think that brings the value up of the work that I do, way up, because now I'm not only providing a landing page with everything you would need to get subscribers, but now I'm also providing an extra potentially 30%, right? Or 30 or 40%.
Definitely. I mean, if you're selling eyeballs, this is the greatest tool ever.
Yeah. And that's
and
usually,
like the big publishers love it for the same reason. They just need more eyeballs.
and that's the thing, is everyone's trying to get more traffic for their podcasts, for their blog, to sell their books, to get speaking engagements, to get coaching clients. There's a lot of that going on. So it's more of a high touch kind of engagement that I think where it's going to make a lot of sense, because you can really take the time to try to build that trust with that lead.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just going to also make the comment, that the data broker business is that's a whole industry, as you know, and there might be lots of different ways. Cause I saw something about you, in order for this solution to work, you have to have like 250 million or 250 billion email addresses. How does that, tell us a little bit about the MD5 I was reading about on your website. So
how it works in general?
Yeah, just for the techies, that's the group
Sure.
is kind of dynamic. There's some techies on the call that might be interested.
So here's how it works right now, and this is not how it's going to work after third-party cookies die. And I still don't really know how it's going to work because no one's connected me to these people who know the solution. There's two parts to it. One is there are networks of companies that cookie browsers, and the way they do that is they pay email marketing companies like Roble, the one I have, they pay to have a script in those companies' newsletters. And when a subscriber to one of those newsletters opens or clicks, it puts a cookie in their browser that has an email hash or an MD5, which Brian just said, in that cookie. And we are part of their network. We pay them for access to that, basically. And so there's a whole bunch, like about half of the US traffic, half of all US traffic we're able to access. And we can see that encrypted email address in their browser. which maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but it is. And anyone can if they go pay for it.
So even when you opt into a newsletter and you immediately opt out, they still got your info. It's out there to these companies.
Until you clear your cookies or something, you know, you're opening and clicking on stuff and it's causing this to happen. Gotcha. That is almost for sure. Everybody reads newsletters, right? So that's one side of it. That's the identification part. Now, what we need to do is the horrible and great thing about MD5 is it's a one-way encryption language, meaning if you take adam@getemails.com and you encrypt it into this language, there's no way for a human to decode it. It's just impossible. You can't you can't get back to adam@getemails.com in any way, shape, or form with this algorithm that they use to decrypt it. However, adam@getemails.com encrypts the same way every time. So if you had from somewhere else every email address in America, you could just encrypt all of them. And when the MD5 came around to the website, you could just literally do a VLOOKUP and see if you have it in your database, which is what we do. And if the database has other information about the person also, then you can grab all of that information with this tactic. So that's the essence of how it works.
Wow.
And man, I had to talk to a lot of people to figure that one out.
I bet. Yeah, that's some black magic stuff, really.
Yeah, I really don't know how it's going to work after this, though. They tell me that the solution is a combination of IP address and device ID email pairs.
So is the MD5 going away because it is you have the ability to
the MD5 is not, the third-party cookie is. So like what's not going to be able to happen is on selfpublish.org, you can't like get emails. We can't see a get emails cookie on selfpublish.org.
Right.
You could cookie people.
That's the core thing.
We can't. Right. Yeah, we can't look at a get emails cookie on your website. We could only look at it on our website. So apparently there's some other method that's 80% as effective, I hope, 75, who knows, that basically says, okay, you're this IP address and this device ID, and that's correlated to this email address and this.
Well, they're going to find you because you have the customers. So it seems to me it's just a matter of someone realizing, well,
I hope so.
We've got the technology. He's got the customers.
Yeah, I hope so. It's a little nerve-wracking in the meantime, though.
Interesting. Well, you got lots of other things going on. Thankfully, you got Roble, and I think it's nice to have the diversification in some ways. You know,
I think in many ways it is, yeah.
And everything happens for a reason. That, you know, there's the good things can come from the bad. You just can't see them at the time. And I'm sure you've experienced that yourself. You got to take risks. Sometimes you crash and burn. Absolutely. All right. Well, you guys, we're coming up to 6:45, kind of when I want to respect everybody's time. Is there any final questions or anything for Adam? Anybody has?
Hey, I just want to say thank you, Adam. That was really insightful. And I think that all too often we hear these stories of, you know, how the product is at its best. And I think that your authentic conversation is really helpful and insightful for businesses that want to grow and want to look for the future. So thank you.
You're welcome. Glad you enjoyed it.
Well said. All right, Adam. Well, I really appreciate it. I know it's a little later in Austin, so have a great night, everyone. And you'll get my email about next month's meeting.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Thanks,
my pleasure. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.